Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Welcome to this webinar on creating a roadmap for 2021. It will focus on clarifying your mission and vision and creating goals that are meaningful and inspiring for your team and supporters. So I'm Mark Robison, Senior Consultant with Humane Network and co-host of the Shelter Success Simplified podcast. Our two presenters today are Bonney Brown and Diane Blankenburg, founders of Humane Network. Humane Network is a nonprofit consulting organization that can help your organization with everything from animal behavior training and fundraising to operations and strategic planning. You can also outsource some of your work to us, such as fundraising and communications. The first conversation with us is free, so don't hesitate to reach out at info@humanenetwork.org. We've done consultations, training, assessments, and executive recruitment for organizations across the country, including at large open admission shelters, spay-neuter clinics, rescue groups, and both nonprofit and governmental agencies. You can check out Bonney and Diane's bios on the Humane Network website and see the rest of our team there too. And so one bit of housekeeping, you can ask questions at any time in the chat window at the bottom of the Zoom window. We'll get to as many of these questions as we can at the end of the main presentation. And so we know your time and attention are valuable, so let's get this presentation started. So now I'll turn things over to Bonney and Diane.
Great, thank you, Mark. This is Diane Blankenburg, and as Mark said, this is the webinar on creating a roadmap for your organization. It's actually the first part of a two-part presentation. And we also have my co-presenter here with us today. Bonney, do you want to say hi?
Hi.
So this first part is about clarifying your mission and creating goals that will be meaningful for your organization and also hopefully be inspiring for your team and supporters. So this is specifically what we're going to cover. Hopefully helping you get clarity and learn how to get clarity on your vision and mission, and some helpful tips on how to define your goals and objectives that really can help you guide you through your daily work and accomplish your mission. As I mentioned, next week we'll have the second part of this series on this particular topic of creating your roadmap, and we'll work on creating really specific action plans that will help you bring your team together and accomplish your mission and vision. So before we get into the meat of it, I want to do a quick poll. Ask each of you to respond when it comes up on the screen. And the question is, does your organization have a written strategic plan? Hopefully everybody can see that. It looks like it's pretty almost, well, it's exactly the same number for yes and no, then a few in the not sure department, which is actually pretty consistent with some of the statistics that we've gathered, and especially through a particular poll or rather survey that we looked at that talks about about half of nonprofits that are currently not working with a formal strategic plan. So as you can see here, according to the Concord Leadership Group, 49% of nonprofit groups don't have a written strategic plan. 29% said they don't have a plan at all, and 19% report that they had a plan, but it's not documented, and 4% said they weren't sure. But obviously, as this quote said, it's really hard to move in a particular direction if you don't even know what direction you're going in. So rowing harder doesn't help if the boat is headed in the wrong direction. So it's not particularly surprising. And actually, I'm quite pleased to see that a number of you, a fairly large number of you, do have written strategic plans. And so for this particular session today, if your organization does have a plan and you feel like it's really being used and is helping you guide through your daily actions, and you're making progress, this may not be as applicable for you, but hopefully it might give you still some tips in defining goals, etc. If you don't have a documented plan, then this plan, or your plan, you do have one, which I know I've had this in my past experience, where there were plans, but they just sat on the shelves and never really were used. Or sometimes they just become outdated because your, times have changed, your organization has changed, and your needs or the community needs have changed. Then this session today is going to be extremely helpful in helping you guide through creating these kinds of plans. Another reason that could be helpful is that you may need to make substantial changes as a result of the pandemic. It could be other things too, but we're all kind of having to rethink what we do and how we do it based on the pandemic and the troubling economic times that has caused. So I don't know if any of you have heard this said, or you've said this yourself of the reasons that you have not created a plan. I've heard these certainly in my own personal experience, but also through our consulting work. And this isn't just applicable to our field, but in my pre-animal welfare world, when I worked in a corporate world, it still often is the concern that it's too hard, it's too busy, we're too busy, it's too complicated, it's going to be too expensive, and especially in the nonprofit world where we have limited resources. So it's very difficult to sometimes understand that stopping and taking the time to plan is really going to save time in the long haul. And you don't have to have perfection with it. I think when I came into this field, I did come from the corporate world where we often built into some of our projects that time up front to do the planning. And it didn't always, it just doesn't always work that way in our field. And it was kind of one of my lessons learned when I came to animal welfare, that we don't always have the time to put a lot of effort into it, but you can still take some time. And again, it doesn't have to be a perfect plan, and there is no one and only right way to do this. So you want to do something that's going to really take advantage of your own organization's strengths, and make sure it works for you and for your community. And ultimately, this plan helps you make decisions down the road and can be a true guide for you, so that you are not having to take the same amount of time or more time down the road to make decisions. It really can help make things more efficient and ultimately more effective, because you're going to be on the right path, as we mentioned earlier. You might want to do this and see the value in taking the time up front. It does allow you to be more proactive about your choices and your decisions and your programs. It's also a great way to get the whole team moving in the same direction. This is challenging. It's challenging for any organization, especially when everybody is so focused on what's in front of them that sometimes they lose sight of the big picture. They lose sight how the various departments or the various roles are interrelated. And it makes sure you're going to get the results, the right results that you want, but also, as I said earlier, with maybe less effort. And it allows you to develop better strategies. And a document like this should be a living document, so that you're going to be adjusting it over time, and be able to make the changes that are going to match what's going on, like I said earlier, in your community or in your organization. And hopefully it's going to eliminate some of the roadblocks that might be holding you back at the current time. So it's another tool to help you assess your progress, figure out what works and what doesn't, and then be able to move forward. I love Stephen Covey. I've studied him over the years in my corporate work. His book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is a great book if you haven't read it. But one of his habits is to begin with the end in mind. This is particularly important in any time you're making a plan and making decisions and creating specific goals and actions to accomplish that plan. And one of his advice when he expanded some of his work to include the business world and leadership, he said he developed this with the concept that you would use this in your daily work, in your each time you develop a task and a project, so that you always have a clear vision of your desired direction and the destination where you want to ultimately end up. So we're going to take another little quick poll here. Which category best represents your organization? Okay, great. Looks like most people are in the small to medium nonprofit, but we have some people in all the other categories. So it's a nice mixture. And I'm sure that small to medium nonprofits are probably where you also least have sometimes that, or feel like you least have that luxury of taking the time to plan. But hopefully we'll give you some tips that will help you do this more easily and more efficiently.
So I'm going to jump in here. This is Bonney, and we're going to talk about the high-level steps that you can take. And these would apply if you are undertaking planning for the first time, or if you're updating an existing plan, say in light of the pandemic or other specific changes to your organization. It's still helpful to go through these same 4 steps. Certainly, even if you're just re-examining at least the first 3. So the first one is getting ready. And during this step, you're going to decide what kind of planning is most appropriate for your organization where you're at now, and who needs to be involved. And we'll go into this in the next slide a little bit further. This is just kind of your overview, so you have a picture of the whole process. Step 2 is about determining the desired outcomes. And this is where you'll discuss or otherwise determine what your organization will achieve and where you want the organization to be in the future. The third step is more, even more concrete. So you're drilling that down to some specific goals. You're going to determine what needs to be accomplished in order to reach those desired results within a specific time frame. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and give you some tips on that. And the last element is re-examining your mission statement. And we'll give you some guidelines for taking a look at your mission statement and making sure that it's still a fit for the organization and the direction that you're going now, and to be sure that it's a tool that's really going to be inspiring to people on the team and also members of the public who you need to support the work that you're doing. Okay, now we're going to delve the next level into each of those steps. We're going to go take a little bit deeper dive. So the first step is getting ready, and we have a few slides on that for you. So this first one is just reviewing the elements of the getting ready phase. So the first thing you want to do is determine what planning process you want to use. And there are several factors for that are going to relate to your organization, your situation, the size of the organization, the scope of your work, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. The second element is figuring out who needs to be part of the discussion and the final decision making. And the last element is what information do you need to gather so you can make smart decisions. So now we're going to talk about we're going to delve a little further into who needs to be part of that process. So if your organization, and why there is not a one size fits all is because of all the differences in organizations. Each organization is unique, and some organizations have really unique strengths, and you want to be sure that you're playing to your strengths. So that's why we don't really advocate a one size fits all approach to these things, but rather thinking about your organization. And I think it's really easy to see why that's important when you consider the difference between a large organization that may have a budget in the millions that handles thousands of animals a year. That's very different than a smaller or a new group that's run by maybe a handful of people. And so that, the needs are different, the capabilities are different. And so you want to be sure that you're thinking about that as you choose the planning tools you're going to use and as you decide who needs to be part of that. Certainly a larger, more established organization is going to want to seek more outside inputs into your planning than a smaller organization or a startup organization. When an organization's in crisis, it's often best to have leadership make some really timely decisions to put the organization on a better path. And then as the organization gains stability, there's time to engage the team more and get more outside input into your planning. The decision to bring in an outside facilitator or a consultant to help with strategic planning, that also is going to depend a lot on your organization. A large group or a group in crisis can often really benefit from expert advice. But if you're a smaller group, maybe a more basic approach that you devise internally is going to work just fine. And if you can't afford to hire a consultant, maybe you can find someone within the community who would be willing to fill that role, maybe an executive director at another organization, for example. Again, just to repeat, there really is no one size fits all solution. So you want to think about your organization and decide what is going to work best for you. I think sometimes the barriers to planning at all is this concept that we have to do something that's going to be a massive production. And that does not have to be the case. And again, if you need advice figuring out where your organization is at, we're always here and happy to chat with you. So people sometimes ask us, why would they even go to the trouble of trying to involve others in this process? It's obvious that the more people you're involving, the longer the process takes and the more inputs you have that you have to sort through. But there are some very real benefits to that. One of them is that it can help you discover alternatives. I think it's easy to sort of fall into a habit or where you have these preconceptions and it's hard to break out of those. And this is true for us and it's true for our colleagues. So, involving more people can help to bring new ideas and inject new energy into the process and into your organization. And also, it does increase buy-in. If people are part of creating something, they're going to feel more invested in it. So those are just some of the reasons why you might consider involving more people in the process. And just because you decide that you are going to involve people doesn't mean that you have to have massive, endless meetings. There are other ways to gather input, and we've listed a few of them here for you. So another barrier, I think, to planning and even to meetings and decision making, I think, is understanding how to manage a meeting. And many board meetings, people use Robert's Rules of Order, or they don't have any particular rules of order at all. And both of those things can be challenging. So there are simpler ways that you can approach decision making in meetings. And one that we like to recommend is called Martha's Rules. There's more on it on the internet, but in the simplest possible terms, a proposal is made and you can take a poll in the room, and it could just be a poll to size up where people are at. Sometimes you can avoid prolonged discussion if people already basically agree. But it can also be used for actual decision making. And the way it works is pretty simple. Once the proposal is put out there, the chair would ask, how people feel about the decision, and people can give, a thumbs up if they like the proposal, a thumbs sideways if they can live with the proposal, and a thumbs down if they're uncomfortable and would like to discuss the proposal further. So it's a simple system, but it can be really effective and it can save time in meetings. So another step in this getting ready process is deciding what information is needed to share with the other participants, so everyone's making wise decisions. Even if your planning group is pretty discreet and small, you still want to be sure people have shared information. And on this slide, we've listed some of the information that can be really helpful to share with your team. And one thing I especially want to highlight here, because we're talking about doing this, now for this year amidst the pandemic, is the challenges and changes that you're experiencing as a result of the pandemic. So those are things that, even if all you're looking at is revising or updating your plan, that could be a really substantial element of it. So thinking that through and making sure that it's either part of a shared discussion, or perhaps these things are in a presentation or provided to people in advance of the discussion in the form of written documents that they're supposed to review. But getting everyone the same information can help save time in the long run, because at least everyone has the same basic viewpoint or facts on which to base everything moving forward. So the last step in getting ready is determining what planning format you're going to use. And there are many of them on the internet. You can find all sorts of different strategies for strategic planning. I think in general, there are sort of two. The big question to ask yourself is what type of planning you want to do. And there are sort of two options. One of those would really to do full strategic planning. And that really may be the best thing for your organization if it's well established or very well organized. And if you already have a strategic plan now that you're actually using, that you've used in the past, this is almost certainly the way to go. However, if your organization is new, if it's small, or if you're going through a particularly difficult time right now, then maybe the organization is struggling, or there's been an inordinate amount of changes, if you have had a strategic plan in the past, but it just really sat on the shelf and it wasn't really part of guiding your daily actions, and maybe now it's outdated, that would be another reason to consider maybe a more basic form of planning, so that you can be sure you're able to execute it and have a plan that you can use. And I think the big question to ask yourself is, if your organization probably is not going to go through a major strategic planning process, then a more down-to-earth approach that's less complicated is going to be the way to go. It is undoubtedly better to have a basic plan than no plan. So before we move on to step 2 in this process, just to wrap up the getting ready phase, we thought it would be helpful to just go through a few of the definitions for you that you have certainly heard about in relation to strategic planning. And just sharing some really simple definitions with you that can be helpful. So a vision statement is the ideal result of the organization's work. The mission statement is an inspiring, focused description of your purpose and how you're going to reach the mission. Values are the principles and standards that your organization feels are really essential to achieving your mission. There's lots of good qualities out there, but if you're defining values, you want to think about which really apply to your work and have a discrete set of values, not an endless list. And goals, that's setting specific objectives, things that you want to achieve that will really further your mission and bring you closer to achieving the vision. So those are the basic definitions. And often people ask if you have to have all of these. And the answer really is not necessarily. But the two that I think you definitely need to have is a mission statement and goals. Those are the minimum two that we would recommend, even for a small organization or an organization that was in crisis or contemplating major changes, be they because of the pandemic or just other reasons that might be affecting your organization. Now, it's important to keep in mind, though, that having a vision can really help you craft your mission statement and help you to clarify it. So there can be a benefit to taking time to develop a shared vision. And Certainly your values have a benefit in that they can help define the culture that you're trying to create for your organization. So that I'm going to hand it back to Diane and she'll go on with step 2.
Yeah, so Bonnie did a great job of introducing step 1, getting ready to you. And step 2 is to determine the desired outcomes. This goes back to the quotes of Stephen Covey. You need to have the end in mind in order to be able to be on the right path. So 3 areas are important to explore as kind of your background discussion in order to be able to determine what your desired outcomes are. The first is, where are you currently at in the organization? And then what are the needs of the animals in your particular service area? And then what is the purpose for your organizations? What's the reason for its basic existence? So in looking at where you're at now in the organization, here's some questions. These are questions that we often use when we go in and do consulting work. They really are helpful in assessing almost anything. They're rather generic, but they get people to think about what really is happening now and what is working. So what's working, what isn't working, what could you do better, what would make the biggest difference, and what gets in the way. Sometimes this is, I know in my consulting work, and I'm interviewing individual staff members, and they don't have usually any trouble coming up with things that they think are problematic or things that they want to do but aren't happening. And then my next question is, well, what is keeping you from doing them? So something is getting in the way. If everybody knows, or a lot of people know what those things are, what is keeping you from making those changes or moving forward in whatever manner that was described? And then here's another really good question, because this is usually one of the common answers when I ask that question is the money. We don't have the funds to do something. So if money was not an obstacle, what would you do? What challenges would we still have? So I think in nonprofits, we do get stuck a lot around this, where we say we can't afford it, but in reality, our mission and our stories can help raise the funds to do what we need to do and do what's right. So you need to really understand what you need to do and want to do, and then figure out how to support it and to work around the challenges. And you may come up with other questions that will help inspire your creative thinking, and hopefully you've put a group together like Bonney had described earlier, that are going to bring various viewpoints to the table. And so the second thing I mentioned that is important to discuss when you're determining your desired outcomes is what does the community need? What needs do you see for animals right now? And especially as Bonney mentioned, and I even mentioned earlier, it's still really important to consider how those needs have changed due to the pandemic and the resulting economic crisis. So we want to be sure that and this is something I personally believe you would regularly assess, but especially since there's been major changes now. And I know that also in our consulting work, sometimes people just organizations think they should, implement the newest program just because it's, a new best practice, but is that really meeting the needs of your community? Is that the best way for your organization to meet those needs? So it really should be driven by the needs, not by the program itself. And then the third thing is what is the purpose of your organization? And I think it's helpful to set aside what your organization is doing, or even what, any problems that you're facing, and think about why your organization was originally created. Why does it exist in the first place? And why does it still exist? And hopefully this is tied to the community's needs, and specifically the needs of the animals in the area where that you are serving. So you've done your homework on these 3 areas, and hopefully have document them. The next step is what do you really want to do in the next 3 to 5 years? Where would you like your organization to be? And what do these, so you look at that information that you've collected and what do they have in common? Where do they intersect? So, and what is your organization really good at? Another thing that I see frequently in our consulting work is that organizations do not have a shortage of ideas, and they are constantly wanting to implement a new program, and sometimes that kind of makes the organization run thin, I guess, and they're dividing up their resources across too many things, and maybe not even doing things that they're particularly good at. So, and if you're looking at it from a community approach, which I think is always helpful, is that maybe there are other organizations that do other things better than yours, and making sure that you're really building on your organization's strengths, and then you can focus, like I said, on what's good and what's really needed, and what your true purpose is. And like I said earlier, that there's usually not a shortage of ideas. And you know, what happens when you get too many ideas? How do you drill those down into something that's going to be manageable? There are some really good tools out there for brainstorming and decision making and prioritizing. We listed some here. This is something we'd be happy to help you with. If you had, we can either help you with facilitating meetings, or we can just give you some ideas and guidance and some of the tools that will help you step through these sessions more effectively and be able to ultimately come out with specific goals and ideas that are going to be able to be managed effectively by your organization. So when you're looking at, again, where you want to be in 3 to 5 years, you know, your desired outcomes can be molded by these 3 types of things, or a combination of them. So they can be based on or founded in life-saving achievements that you might have already built into, even maybe to your mission, if you currently have a mission, or improvements that you see that the community needs, and certainly can involve how you want to get the community engaged and supporting your mission and your goals ultimately. And then I've also, you know, this is one that the third bullet here is what everybody's facing right now, is stability and sustainability. And I know we've been working with organizations where they've kind of had the time because of the pandemic, and maybe not having as many people coming into their shelter, and pausing to look at how can we do things better, and how can we meet the needs more efficiently in the future, and be able to do it either with less resources, or how can we build up our resources so that we can be more sustainable and have the infrastructure to be able to carry on in the future. Here's some helpful tool, not a tool, but a list of trends in the community that we have certainly seen. I'm sure you have too, that can help you guide your decision making here. You certainly may have others, and if you think of others, please feel free to put them into the chat function. But I'm not going to go over these in great detail, but just just list them out here as far as what you might want to consider when you are doing your brainstorming, and what your desired outcomes are. Access to care is something we're seeing more and more the need for. And in fact, we just opened a few months ago an affordable spay, neuter, and veterinary clinic in Reno to help meet that need in our community. Community Resource Center is seeing that happening more and more on a informal, and also on a formal basis. Quality of care, and as far as the enrichment of animals in a shelter, increased community engagement, and expertise in saving maybe the higher risk animals, which a lot of shelters are now seeing that that's what what's the higher population of in most shelters and rescue groups these days. And of course, the work-life balance for staff and is always an issue. So the third step in creating your roadmap is to set goals. And what specifically should you accomplish or do you want to accomplish within the next year in order to be able to achieve those 3 to 5 year objectives? We've said this a couple times that there's more than one way to get where you want to go. And this is always the case. But you want to look at both what your options are and what your obstacles might be. So what are the possible ways to get there before you make that decision? A lot of times I think it's a human nature to want to jump to conclusions or jump to the solutions. I know that's, my personality type is a lot like that. And it's easy for me to come up with a way to do something. But if you can hold back a little bit and look at all your options, because you might be missing out on something that's really going to help you get there more easily and more effectively, ultimately. And then you also want to look at those obstacles. What are the challenges to getting there so that you can be sure you're considering those, both when you're making the decision of how to do it, but also that you can work around them even if you decide to go forward. When you're developing those goals, you want to make sure they're SMART goals. And I imagine there's probably almost nobody on this call that or this webinar that hasn't heard this term before. And it may sound like it's, just one of those business concepts that doesn't really have isn't really applicable to our particular field. But I'd like to suggest that it truly is. And if you use this, you're going to find that your goals are going to be much more effective and meaningful and achievable, because you're going to really know what it is you're trying to accomplish. And the first is to be specific. And if you don't understand what it is, then obviously you're not going to be able to accomplish it. A lot of goals are not quantifiable. They're not measurable. It says, we'll say we want to improve this or that. We want to increase, we want to decrease. But what does that mean? How will we know we got there? Decrease or increase by how much, over what, and what specifically are we measuring? They need to be achievable. And I truly believe, and I know Bonney and I in our work at the Nevada Humane Society, where they're set stretch goals all the time because they are inspiring. Now, if they're really totally out of reach or almost out of reach, it can be demotivating. But for the most part, you want them to be out there so that you're inspiring your team to really push and then, and obviously be able to celebrate those achievements when you get there. It needs to be relevant. Again, if you have a mission, and we're going to talk more about the mission in a little bit, if you have a really relevant mission, that is going to help you guide you in selecting your goals and make sure it's consistent with that mission. And then, of course, time bound. Are there target dates or due dates or some time period that you're trying to increase something so that you know how to measure it and again, when you have actually achieved the goal. So just a couple examples of extremely simple SMART goals. And here, first one's increase foster homes. So fostering 20% more kittens in 2021 over 2020. Or increase the total number of volunteer hours for 2021 by 25% over what was worked in 2020. So what I find is helpful is that you take the list of the SMART requirements, and each time you develop a goal, just run down that list and use it as a test to determine whether you truly have the best goal that you can. So now we've gone through step 1, get ready. Step 2, determine your desired outcome. And step 3 is set goals. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Bonney for step 4.
Right. So now we're going to take a look at your mission statement. If you don't have one, this is the time when you'd be creating one, but assuming most of you on the call have a mission statement, you want to take a look at it and see if it still accurately captures what you're trying to achieve now based on the decisions you made about the organization's future direction. You also want to take a look at your mission statement and see if it works well to inspire support. So ideally, your mission is not only going to explain what you do, but it's going to inspire others to want to support it. So donors, volunteers, staff members, it should have an inspirational element. When people hear it, they should feel good, like they want to be part of that. And the last question is, when you look at your current mission statement, do you and your team feel enthusiastic about it? Do you feel inspired by the mission yourself? So those are the three questions we suggest you ask about your mission statement. And if the answer to any of them is no, we think you should consider updating your mission statement. So let's do a quick poll now about your mission statement. Do you feel that your current mission statement is effective and impactful enough to guide your organization into the future? That's amazing that 64% of you do. Really wonderful. The rest of you, I think, will benefit from the rest of what we're going to share, and it may even help you to think slightly differently about your mission statement. So we're going to forge ahead. As you amend your mission statement, keep in mind that you want it to do 4 things. If you want it to talk about what you do, why you do it, how you do it, and what sets your organization apart. And it's really important that the way it's worded actually be inspiring. So we're going to share with you in a moment a little video. Ultimately, your mission statement needs to be wordsmithed in such a way that it's going to make a powerful marketing statement for why people should support your work. And while you're wordsmithing it, you want to be really careful not to snuff out the clarity, the specificity, and the passion that are really crucial to inspiring others to support your work. So the wordsmithing is often best undertaken by one skilled individual rather than a whole committee. And we have a short 4-minute video for you by Dan Heath of Fast Company called How to Write a Mission Statement That Doesn't Suck. And we think it'll help you avoid some of the common pitfalls. So we're going to run that for you now.
I want to show you why most mission statements are so terrible. So let's say that you own a chain of pizza parlors, and maybe you have a mission statement that you've drafted, and it says something like, our mission is to serve the tastiest damn pizza in Wake County. Now that's pretty good, if you ask me. If I was one of your employees, I could get excited about that. But here's where things go off the rails. So you invite all your colleagues to come join you and to help you wordsmith this thing, and you all sit around a table, and right in front of your eyes, a transformation happens. All of these people who you like and respect suddenly become 10th grade English teachers and begin to nitpick every word of this thing.
Hey, I really like the word present better than serve. It has a nice resonance.
We obviously can't say damn. And why limit ourselves to Wake County?
And guys, I know our pizza is good, but what about the calzones and the salads? Why don't we just say highest quality Italian food?
Our Greek salad isn't Italian.
We haven't even talked about the atmosphere yet, the big comfy booths and the kids' birthday parties and all that.
Yeah, great point. You know what we're really doing here? We're providing a family entertainment solution.
Yeah, solution.
Nailed it.
And everyone's excited now. You're almost there. And then Steve at the end of the table pipes up.
Listen, guys, we haven't mentioned anything about integrity. That's what it's all about. At the end of the day, integrity.
And is anyone at the table going to rise up and go to the mat against the word integrity being in the mission statement? Doubtful. So presto, that's in. And now here's your new and improved mission statement. Our mission is to present with integrity the highest quality entertainment solutions to families. I know this is a little bit silly, but you got to admit, this is what 99% of mission statements sound like. And now you know why. There's this cycle of making words more ambiguous and more fancy until all of the meaning, leaches out. Here's how to avoid that. 2 tips. Number one, use concrete language. Great example comes from this fast-growing small business called Sonic Bids. Check this out. We want to help musicians get gigs and promoters book the right bands. We're a bunch of people who think that music can truly change the world and make it smaller and better. I love that. I think it gives you a picture of exactly what they do and also gives you a hint why they might want to do that. And that brings us to the second point, which is talk about the why. You know, most mission statements are really long on statement and really short on mission. And the whole point of this is to talk about why you're doing what you do. You've got to talk about what makes you care. So let me give you a famous example from Johnson & Johnson. This is the first line in their credo. Our first responsibility is to the doctors, nurses, and patients, mothers and fathers, and all others who use our products and services. Well, all right. I mean, that's something that you could get out of bed to go do. Now contrast that with the guiding principles of ExxonMobil. Did you feel that? A little part of your soul just died reading that mission statement. So now you've seen why bad mission statements happen to good people, and I've given you 2 tips for avoiding that fate. If you're interested in learning more about writing a great mission statement, go to fastcompany.com/Heath. And in the meantime, I want to challenge you to do the impossible, to create a mission statement that says something. And one final hint, if it includes the word solution in it, you're not there yet. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so to wrap up, your organization's mission statement is really important, and can be the foundation of your success. Your donors, your staff, and volunteers, they all need inspiration. Management needs guidance for their efforts and for decision making. So you want to make sure that everyone hears about and understands the mission. And we're going to talk more about that next week in our session. As your mission is also a really key element in unifying your team and getting everyone pulling in the same direction. So that's it for today. We can tell you that next week we will be talking about how to turn your goals into action plans. Not just for the organization, but for departments and individuals on the team, so that it's really a living document that serves your organization, and that at the end of the year, you can actually achieve those goals. And also how to communicate with your whole team about it, and why that's so important and how to approach it. So we're looking forward to that. And now I think we may have a few minutes for some questions. Mark?
Okay, yes. So now's the time for the Q&A portion. And so toss them into the chat window. Before we jump into that, I definitely want to make sure that we thank Petco Foundation for supporting this webinar. The Petco Foundation is working to create a national lost and found database for pets. You can learn more and join the initiative by visiting petcofoundation.org/lostpets. And now for the first question. So Rachel asked a question on the slide where you had the definitions, and she asked if any of them were measurable. And so we've got vision statement, mission statement, values, and goals. And so what do you want to measure out of those things?
Well, I'll jump in here. This is Diane. Well, goals would definitely be the one that's measurable. I mean, the goals are what would help you measure accomplishing the other things too. But as I mentioned in the section I did on setting goals, is that you want to be sure that those goals are following the SMART test, and that would make sure that they are measurable.
Okay. And so the next question is, Christy asks, does a spay and neuter transport need a mission statement? So perhaps it's, if your organization is small, do you really need one?
Yes, if you want to accomplish things, I think you do. Some people even have a personal mission statement that they use to guide their personal decision making in their lives. And so, yes, I think any organization, especially if there's more than one person involved, it's really important to have a mission statement. And it doesn't have to be hard to create one. I think you saw with that Fast Company video how a really concise mission statement can be impactful.
Okay, and is there like a maximum or minimum length for a mission statement? What is too much?
Yeah, I don't think there are any hard, fast rules, but I feel like being as concise as you can be is important. And that's why having someone who can help you with wordsmithing is good. Some organizations have a leader who is really good at articulating the mission, a sort of a visionary or a leader who has that kind of mindset who can do that. But if not, there are people who can help you. Almost certainly someone on your team is good at writing and could help you devise a concise mission statement that would still do the job. That said, I have seen some that are longer that are very impactful. We have a handout that we'll provide to everyone who signed up that has some sample mission statements that you can take a look at and a little bit more guidance.
And if I can add to that, Bonnie, you can also kind of create a subset of your mission statement sometimes that's shorter, maybe like a tagline that represents the core piece of it, because I do think it's helpful if your staff and your supporters can really remember what the mission is and keep it in a top of mind as they're accomplishing, whatever their role is at the organization.
Okay, and I think we have time for one last question, and yeah, I think it maybe sets us up for future sessions. And so Jolene asks, so we've identified our needs and we have our goals set, but we need help on how to do it. And so what would you say to that question?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that sets us up for the future. The next session in a week is going to talk about how to really be sure that those elements that you've developed are being used every day by the organization, that they're actually practically helpful, that they're living and not something you put away on a shelf someplace. And that involves communication with your volunteers and your staff and your clients who are people in the community interacting with the organization, your donors. Really everybody needs to hear about your mission, and in some cases even your goals, because you're engaging them in helping to achieve those. And then the second set is about really assessing your organization and identifying where there might be challenges or bottlenecks and how you can address internal challenges. But the key role of these things, to me, in addition to communicating and inspiring people to support your work, is getting everyone on the same page so that your team's unified and moving in the same direction. That's a challenge in almost any form of organization, but I think especially in this field. Diane, you may have something to add to that.
No, I agree with you totally. And I think as you said, we'll be covering it in our future webinar session. So if there's still additional questions, I think you can also reach out to us directly, and we'd be happy to provide information. It's info@humanenetwork.org. So we're always happy to give you specific guidance and coaching you through some of these sessions if needed. So I would say hopefully you'll join us in the future, and if you still have additional questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Okay, well, we appreciate the time that you took to join us today for this webinar. And on Friday, I will send you all a link so that you can share this webinar with others. And part 2 of Create Your Roadmap will be a week from today at the same time. This webinar was supported by the Petco Foundation and presented by Humane Network. If you'd like to be notified of future webinars, be sure to sign up for the Shelter Success Simplified e-newsletter at the bottom of every page on our website at humanenetwork.org. And so that does it for this session. And thank you for all the work you do helping animals.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Have a good evening.